Hi guys, it's me, CHD, and welcome to another episode of the podcast where today we are reviewing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend, the final part of this triple header we have just finished in the month of April. And it was a good race weekend in Jeddah. Qualifying was very exciting. We had a very mixed up grid. And the race promised a lot in terms of entertainment, but it just never really happened. We just don't really tend to get great races around the Jeddah circuit. Yeah, 2021 we had a mental race, but that was just an anomaly, really, that Grand Prix. 2022 was a very good race, but since then, these races in Saudi Arabia just have not been doing it for me. It's just not really been that great. Pretty bang average race, you'd have to say. I mean, yeah, we got the Max and Piastri stuff at the start, a good fight for the podium, but other than that, nothing really happened. So, yeah, wasn't great in the end. But a Grand Prix happened, so let's go through the results of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri, the race winner, his third win of the year, winning three of the first 5 races. That is absolutely championship form. Second, Max Verstappen, still a good result for the world champion. Third, Charles Leclerc, brilliant result from him. The best drive of his season and the best result of Ferrari's season, at least in the Sunday races. Lando Norris in fourth. Fifth was George Russell. Sixth, Kimi Antonelli. Seventh, Lewis Hamilton. And then 8th and 9th, the two Williamses of Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. What a result for Williams. And 10th, Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls car. It was a competitive race, I will say that. But we didn't get as much wheel-to-wheel action as I think I was expecting, just given the grid makeup we had going into the race. But that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But let's go into now how the championship standings are affected from this 5th race of the season. And we'll start on the driver's side, and we have a new championship leader on the driver's championship side. Oscar Piastri, on 99 points, leads on the drivers' championship. He's 10 points clear of Lando Norris, his teammate. Max Verstappen is 12 points off the lead in third. I think Verstappen will be satisfied with how he's done so far this season, given how slow the Red Bull has been at times compared to the McLaren. George Russell fourth, not a great race for him for the championship, but he is still, 26 points behind, which is still good for him. Leclerc fifth. Leclerc is slowly pulling himself up the championship, but he is still quite a bit off. He's over 50 points behind the leader now. Kimi Antonelli 6th, Lewis Hamilton 7th, Alex Albon in 8th, Esteban Ocon 9th, and Lance Stroll still in P10. And then on the constructors' side, McLaren clearly in the lead. They've won almost every race this season, and they are 77 points clear of the next team, being Mercedes in second. Red Bull are third, but only 11 points clear of Ferrari, who had a bit of a better Saudi Arabian Grand Prix than expected. Williams are now up to 5th place, 5 points clear of Haas. Aston Martin then in 7th. Racing Bulls a point closer to Aston Martin in 8th. And then Alpine 9th and Sauber 10th. Level on 6 points. That's your Constructors' Championship standings. And as usual, let's go through the race pace data from the Grand Prix, just to understand from a data perspective why the results ended up the way they did. Obviously, this is the average lap time difference throughout the entire field. And Red Bull, actually, over the course of the whole Grand Prix, were slightly quicker than McLaren. If Max had not had his penalty for what happened at the start, maybe Max wins the race. Who knows? But yeah, Red Bull were slightly quicker than McLaren over the course of the Grand Prix. And then McLaren only half a tenth back, nothing really much in it. And then Ferrari only a quarter of a second a lap off the absolute best pace over the race. They have definitely improved their pace, their race pace, no doubt about it. Their qualifying pace still is not good enough, but their race pace absolutely has got better. They have a new flaw that they did bring at the Bahrain Grand Prix, which has settled their car down a bit more in the races. So that's helping, and that's why Ferrari have appeared stronger on the Sunday of the last couple Grand Prix. So yeah, good race pace, but ultimately Ferrari still don't have that race-winning pace, and obviously that's what Ferrari ultimately are searching for. And then fourth quickest, Mercedes. That was easily the worst Grand Prix of their season so far. Not just in terms of result, but the pace of the car was, especially in the second half of the race, it was very poor. And as you can see, 6.5 tenths off the pace of Red Bull and McLaren, and 4 tenths of a lap slower than Ferrari. Very bad Grand Prix for them. Might just be a one-off, but we'll have to see in Miami whether this trend continues. And the best midfield team was Williams, so 1.2 seconds off the pace of the front runners, and they were a tenth better than Racing Bulls. Aston Martin then a tenth back from them. Aston Martin's race pace was actually pretty decent compared to what we saw from them in qualifying. Haas, not as good as I think we expected, but not terrible either. And then a big drop off to Sauber. And then, of course, Alpine had the slowest race pace, but that was with Jack Doohan in the Alpine. Obviously, Gasly crashed out of the race after a few corners. So Alpine's race pace probably would have been right there with Williams and Racing Bulls had Gasly actually finished the Grand Prix. But data-wise, that's how it looked with the race pace from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's get into the teams and how they did, and start, of course, with the usual race winners and championship leaders, McLaren, and Oscar Piastri yet again pulls off the win. Delivered the result that was absolutely there to be delivered, and you've got to praise him for that. Now, was he as good as Verstappen in the race, performance-wise? Probably not, but Oscar Piastri delivered, most importantly, the result, and that is what matters in a championship battle. At the start, it was close between Piastri and Verstappen, but Max clearly just drove himself off the track. I don't think Oscar forced Max off the circuit. I just don't think that was the case at all. And I think Max deserved the 5-second penalty, but I would have liked if the FIA had instead told Max to let Oscar back through, or to let him through in general, so that we could have got a good battle for the lead in those first few laps of the Grand Prix, rather than Max having a penalty and Oscar not really pushing too hard because he knows Max has a penalty. I would have much rather it have been, a situation where Max lets Oscar back through, rather than, what we ended up getting. Maybe the reason they never asked Max to let Oscar through is because they weren't sure whether Max would have actually done it. Maybe that was part of their thinking, which I don't blame them necessarily for that type of thinking. But, yeah, that's just what I would have preferred to see rather than what we got. And that's really what I think hurt a lot of what the potential race entertainment had for us for this Grand Prix. Max had his penalty. Oscar just looked after his tyres and then surprisingly made the earlier pit stop. Eventually, though, came out ahead of Verstappen, not just because of the undercut, but also because Max had to serve his penalty in the pits. And then Piastri held on for victory. He didn't dominate the race. He only won by, 3 or 4 seconds. But Oscar was never in any serious doubt as to whether he was going to win that race. He was always in control once he especially got into the lead after the first round of pit stops, and only round of pit stops were complete. So congratulations to Piastri. Didn't really have to do anything in the race, and most importantly, delivered the result. And that's why he is now leading the Drivers' Championship. Well, partly that is why he's leading the Drivers' Championship. A big reason he's also leading is because his teammate, yet again, had another poor weekend. Lando Norris, awful qualifying, 10th on the grid, bottled a chance at pole position, put it in the wall, and he messed up his weekend from there. And that's why, ultimately, he was not winning the race. He could have easily won, Lando, this Grand Prix. His pace in the race was very good. His pace throughout the weekend was pretty good. But ultimately, it's about producing when it matters most. And Oscar does that a lot more than Lando does. And that's why Oscar is in the lead of the championship. In terms of the race, Lando just spent too much time in that first stint making his way past slower cars. Especially Lewis Hamilton. McLaren's team boss, Andrea Stella, did come out after the Grand Prix and say that the time lost with Lewis Hamilton, battling Lewis Hamilton, that is what cost Lando the podium. Now, it would be easy to blame Lewis Hamilton for that, but you can't blame Lewis Hamilton for that. You should blame instead Lando Norris for that, because Lando stupidly overtook Hamilton into the final corner without even bothering to remember that, of course, Lewis would then have the DRS down the pit straight, and Lando twice did Norris into turn one. Surely Lando, he knows that's a thing at this track, having DRS in the right places. So, why did he not cop onto that earlier? I really do have to question his racecraft. It is something that just isn't at the same level as other drivers, especially the other quality drivers he's fighting, like a Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri. Just isn't quite good enough, and ultimately, that's why he missed out on the podium. Yeah, he had great pace, he pushed hard, but that battle with Hamilton cost him third place. So, yeah, disappointing Grand Prix weekend for Norris. Somehow doesn't get a podium when McLaren were so much quicker than the rest of the field. Just cannot be tolerated, I'm afraid. And now, Lando, 10 points behind Piastri in the championship. And with the form the way it is, I can only see Piastri building that championship lead up even more over the coming races, because Lando, as the pressure continues, and it will continue to rise, especially with him likely to be in a good championship position going forward for the season, as the season goes on, I don't see Lando's level improving. He should win more races this year. I think that will happen. But on a consistent level, I don't think his form is going to get better. And that is really what is going to cost him the championship. Because, as I said during the race weekend, during my watch-along streams, when the pressure rises, he wilts under that pressure. And you cannot do that if you are fighting for a championship. You just cannot. And that's what he's doing already 5 races into the year. Never mind 15 or 20 races into the season. And remember, we've only got, we're not even, 25% into the season. We've still got, I think maybe the next Grand Prix would be the 25% mark of the season. And already Lando is, doing what he's been doing. So, yeah, just really disappointing yet again from Lando. For Piastri, though, again, even though he didn't really have to do much in the race, and I don't think Piastri had as good of a weekend as he had in Bahrain in terms of his own performance, Piastri wins again and is now the clear championship leader. And with how quick that McLaren is, and how well Oscar's performing right now and the form he's in, I don't see Oscar losing the lead of the championship for at least, quite a while. He's in a very, very strong position, is Oscar, for 2025. And he could very well be Australia's first drivers' champion since 1980, I believe, with Alan Jones. It could very well be the year of the Australian. We will see in Abu Dhabi. But let's go on to Red Bull Racing. Not really much to say about them other than what happened with Verstappen at the start. I know Max is disappointed and Red Bull are disappointed and they believe that, he was hard done by. But, of course, that's going to be their view of the situation. It wasn't an absolute slam dunk necessarily, the decision to give him a penalty. But I think it was fair enough to give him a penalty. Because if you go back and look at the incident, he was always heading off the track. I don't think Piastri was reckless in possibly pushing him off the track. I just don't think that was the case at all. And he got a penalty for it, which again, in my view, is fair enough. After that though, I thought Max performed really well. His pace in the race was really, really strong. And on another day, maybe if he doesn't get that penalty, maybe he does win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Who knows? But he did everything he could in that Grand Prix other than obviously fairly race, I guess you could technically call it, at the first chicane. But other than that, it was still a great weekend. Max, he's only 12 points off the championship lead. I think he is definitely going to be satisfied with that, considering he knows the car still has some real fundamental issues. This weekend has been a good weekend for Red Bull because mainly of the high-speed corners at the Jeddah circuit. When we get to Miami, it's going to be a different story. Red Bull are not going to be as strong at that Grand Prix. So, it's going to be tricky, the next Grand Prix for the Red Bull team. But ultimately, I think Verstappen, like I said, should be satisfied with how he's doing in the championship. Not doing anywhere near as bad as maybe he should be doing compared to Piastri, who is leading. For Yuki Tsunoda, I feel sorry for Tsunoda because the accident at the start was not his fault. Gasly went for a stupid move around the outside. Two cars were never going to fit through turn 4. And, surprise, surprise, they crashed. Tsunoda then had too much damage to continue. The only thing Tsunoda could have done is had a better qualifying that would have avoided him being in close quarter with Gasly. Tsunoda definitely should have had a better qualifying. I think he was a couple places lower down on the grid than really he should have been. So that's all he could have done probably to avoid that accident. But Tsunoda is definitely closing the gap to Verstappen. He is getting quicker and quicker every Grand Prix. So watch out for Tsunoda. He is getting better. But for Red Bull, a good weekend. A lot better than Bahrain, but they are going to suffer a bit more in Miami. If they get a podium in Miami, I think that'd probably be a very good result. Because, I just don't think that Miami track, with its quite a few slow and medium speed corners, is going to suit that Red Bull that well, really, at all. So, Red Bull are not going to have as fun a time in Miami as they've had before in that car. Let's quickly go on to Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, what a drive. The driver of the day in the race. And one of the drivers of the weekend. He was absolutely on it the whole weekend. Got the best out of the car in qualifying. Fourth he was very disappointed with, but it was the best he could do. The car just isn't that quick over a qualifying lap at the minute to be really fighting for pole like Russell and Verstappen and Piastri were. In the race, though, he initially wasn't doing that great, but then he kept quite close to George Russell. And then Russell obviously pitted on, I think, was it lap 21? Leclerc went a lot longer into the race, did some really good lap times, even personal best lap times for Leclerc. and then went about 10 laps longer on the tyres. Didn't really lose any time on track once he came out of his pit stop. And then when he came out of his pit stop, was super quick, passed Russell, and ended up finishing miles ahead of Russell, who had tyre issues we'll get into in a moment. And then thankfully for him, held off Lando Norris before the end of the race. That is a brilliant race from Leclerc. And yeah, ever since really the Chinese Grand Prix, where he somehow beat Lewis Hamilton with a broken front wing, he really has been very strong. It's just a shame that car has not been able to fight for race wins, because if it was, I think Leclerc probably would have a couple race wins by now if the car was quick enough for that, but it clearly isn't at the moment. And that is something that Ferrari still need to work on. One positive, as I said earlier, though, the race pace has improved in this last couple races, so that is a plus, and that will help them if they do eventually improve this car. But overall, a great result for Leclerc. It's not going to help his championship because Piastri still finished ahead of him, and I think Leclerc is way too far behind at this point in the Drivers' Championship. He's already, I think, 52 points behind. I just think, again, that the gap is too big. I don't think Leclerc can win the championship in that car this season. But if he can start picking up some podiums, then at least for the, say, second or third in the championship, maybe those positions are not out of reach. Yeah, I know that's not where Leclerc wants to finish, but it would still, at least for him, represent a good season and keep up his reputation going forward. So let's see if Ferrari can maybe start getting some podiums. It's going to be hard because Mercedes, I think, will have a stronger Miami Grand Prix than they had in Saudi Arabia. I think the Mercedes car definitely will go better around the Miami track than what they had in Jeddah. Ferrari, I don't really fancy their chances that great, I have to say, around that Miami circuit. I'm not saying they'll be terrible. I just don't think they're going to be that great, if I'm being honest. So yeah, we'll see how they do, but I don't have high hopes for them. Lewis Hamilton, a quick word on him. As you would have seen with the race results earlier, he was absolutely miles behind his teammate. I don't care if the balance of the car wasn't right. It's up to you as a driver to adapt. Lewis Hamilton knows this, and he ultimately was awful in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend. At no point did he have any pace. I thought in the race he would have a bit more and would be a bit closer to Leclerc on pace, but he was just terrible. He was, 5, even 0.6 of a second per lap slower than Leclerc. It was absolutely terrible from Lewis Hamilton. And clearly he is washed. It is just so obvious at this point. And it's a shame to say that, because I was really excited to see what Hamilton potentially could do in a Ferrari, even up to this point of 2025. But yeah, it's just been such an awful season. I don't really see how it's going to get any better at the next Grand Prix. He's never really had a good Miami Grand Prix, so I don't think he's going to do any better next time around. I think the only way his results improve is if that car massively improves. I don't think he is just going to suddenly become the Lewis Hamilton of old. Maybe at the odd race we'll see him, performing strongly, but he just doesn't have it anymore on a consistent basis. It's time to accept reality, I'm afraid. But yeah, Ferrari, a good result in the race in the end, but too little too late for the championship. Mercedes will finish up with, very bad race pace, and it was because they were just wearing their tyres out quite a lot. George Russell complaining about tyres during the race in the first stint. He said his tyres were absolutely toast a couple of laps before he pitted. And then even had worries about the tyre making it to the end of the race. towards the end, and he was so slow, was Russell, compared to Leclerc and Norris and even Piastri and Verstappen. It was quite incredible how far off the pace Russell was. But, you know, at least he still finished in P5. It is still a decent result. It's not a good result, but it's decent enough. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, Mercedes' aim absolutely would have been a podium finish, and they didn't get that. So, yeah, that is a shame for Mercedes. But it kind of feels like the Japanese Grand Prix we had at Suzuka. It feels like a minor setback. I don't think this is going to continue at the next Grand Prix. The next Grand Prix in Miami, I think they will be the closest team to McLaren. So expect them back on the podium in the next Grand Prix in Miami. And then hopefully after that at Imola, when Mercedes have said they have got a raft of upgrades planned, that's where those upgrades need to start doing their thing, because Mercedes have still got a good chance at the championship. They just need that upgrade to push them forward, as I've said a million times by now. But yeah, 5th and 6th is not the end of the world for Mercedes. Still 18 points. They still are comfortably second in the championship. So yeah, it's not the end of the world, but just a bit disappointing compared to, I think, what we expected from Russell and Mercedes in general. But that's the way it was in the end for Mercedes-Benz. Shout out to Williams, great result, 8th and 9th. Also shout out to Carlos Sainz for finally getting on top of things and beating Albon in both qualifying and the race. Even though he wasn't massively quicker than Albon, fact is he beat Albon, and that is what matters. We'll see how Sainz and Williams do in Miami as Williams move back into 5th in the championship. But yeah, that is your Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend. Again, a decent Grand Prix weekend, but maybe the race not quite giving us the brilliant ending that it needed. Quickly, just want to let you guys know what the plan of content is going forward. So there will be no more content this week on the channel. The next bit of content will be probably this time next week, next Monday or Tuesday, which would be like a few days before the Miami Grand Prix, where I will be uploading a video covering the championship battle for 2025 on the driver's side and looking at our contenders for the year, and I guess predicting how I think they will go forward from there in the drivers' championship battle. Now we've had 5 races in 2025. So yeah, that video will be coming out in about a week. And then for the Miami Grand Prix, as I said during my race watch along towards the end, I will be doing a qualifying watch along, but I will not be doing a race watch along. If, though, there is a rain forecast for the race on the Sunday, then I will do a race watch along. But if not, if it's going to be a dry race, I will not be doing a race watch along, because the Miami Grand Prix we know is going to be terrible if it's dry. So I'm only planning on doing a qualifying stream for that weekend. And of course, on the Monday, the day after the Grand Prix, I will, upload a podcast giving you my thoughts as to what I thought happened in Miami. But yeah, that is the plan for the next 2 weeks on the channel. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the content I gave you over this Easter weekend. And thank you if you are a new subscriber. Been great to have you along. Make sure as well to smash a like button on this video. And if you have done so on the streams this weekend, again, a massive thank you. And a massive thank you in general for the great numbers we've had. Not just this past weekend, but the weekend before. We've had a lot of viewers coming around in this last couple of weeks. So yeah, thank you guys very much for that. But until my next video again next week, looking at the championship contenders, and until the Miami Grand Prix weekend and my stream for qualifying, covering the qualifying session in Miami, until then guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.